Section 1. You're sitting at your desk, scrolling through your messages, or maybe checking your email. It's a routine moment, yet it's about to change. A notification pops up. You don't even need to see who it's from. The message feels like it's punched you in the gut. You feel the tension rise in your chest, your mind races. Maybe it's something frustrating from work, an unexpected personal message, or a social media post that gets under your skin. Suddenly, you're consumed by it. All of your focus, all of your mental energy, is now wrapped up in that one message. Your mood shifts in an instant. Stress, anger, shame, guilt, all of these emotions flare up in a heartbeat. And just like that, your day has been hijacked. You've lost control, and you're no longer in the driver's seat of your own emotions. Sound familiar? That feeling when a text, an email, or a notification takes over your whole mood and mindset. One message can shift your mental state, throwing you into a spiral of negative emotions. It doesn't matter if it's a casual chat with a friend or a work-related issue, the emotional impact is real. And often, that's where the problem begins. You've probably noticed how that one message can completely derail your entire focus, your productivity, and your relationships. But why does it have to be this way? Why does that one notification have such control over your emotions? Is there a way to break free from this cycle? Here's the truth: if you're constantly reacting to every message or notification, you're handing over control of your emotions to external events. You've likely experienced how exhausting and frustrating it can be on this emotional roller coaster, reacting to every ping and message that comes your way. In the short term, it feels like a quick release, but in the long term, it wears you down, drains your energy, and makes you feel out of control. It creates unnecessary conflict in your relationships, strains your professional life, and ultimately takes away your peace of mind. Think about it. In your work life, you might receive an email that rubs you the wrong way, and immediately, you fire off a response full of emotion. Later, you regret it, and now the tension between you and your colleague lingers. Or in your personal life, maybe you snap at your partner over something small, just because you reacted impulsively to a text message. The stakes are high, and the cost of not changing this behavior is steep. It means lost time, wasted energy, damaged relationships, and constant emotional exhaustion. If you don't do something about it, this pattern will continue, and you'll stay stuck in this cycle of emotional reactivity, where every message sends you into a tailspin. It's a pattern that's easy to fall into, but it doesn't have to be your reality. The good news is, there's a way out. You can break the cycle of emotional texting, and you can do it today. You don't have to let every message dictate your emotional state. Instead, you can learn to create space between receiving a message and reacting to it. You can pause, gather your thoughts, and respond with intention, rather than letting the emotions take over and drive your response. Imagine how much better it would feel to control your reactions, to feel calm and centered, even when your phone buzzes. What if you could stop reacting impulsively and start responding thoughtfully, even when life throws you a curveball in the form of a text, email, or notification? Here's what you'll get out of today's lesson. First, you'll learn a powerful technique called the reply window rule. This rule will give you a built-in pause between receiving a message and sending your response. This small change will allow you to regain control over your emotions and stop reacting impulsively. Next, you'll discover how this simple pause can drastically improve your relationships and decision-making. You'll be able to pause, think, and respond thoughtfully, rather than impulsively firing off a message you'll later regret. Finally, by the end of this lesson, you'll have a practical strategy you can apply to every text, message, or notification you receive, which will help you feel calmer, more focused, and in control. You'll be able to break free from the emotional reactivity that's been hijacking your day and take back control of your emotional well-being. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. First, we're going to tear apart the belief that you need to respond immediately to every message. This sense of urgency keeps you locked in a reactive state, always at the mercy of whatever message comes your way. Next, we'll dive into how delaying your response for just a few moments can give you the mental space you need to respond from a place of calm and clarity. Then, we'll explore how you can implement this rule into your daily routine, so you're no longer at the mercy of every message. After that, we'll take a closer look at the real-world applications of this strategy, with concrete examples from your work, relationships, and personal life. Finally, I'll show you how to turn this simple technique into a habit, so that you no longer feel like you're constantly reacting to life's messages. You'll be able to respond with calm, composure, and control. Hold on to this thought. In just a few minutes, I'm going to walk you through a Friday night situation where this simple rule helps you avoid a major blow-up with someone you care about. It's going to be a powerful example, so don't miss it. Section 2. In the last section, we explored how emotional reactivity to texts and messages robs us of control over our emotions. We learned how easy it is to fall into the trap of reacting impulsively and how harmful that can be. The goal here is not just to avoid reacting poorly, but to shift from reaction to response. One of the most powerful tools for achieving this is the practice of delaying your response, giving you the space you need to process your emotions and choose a more measured, thoughtful reaction. Delaying your response isn't about ignoring the message or avoiding confrontation, it's about giving yourself the time you need to regain emotional clarity. Think of it as pressing pause on a movie, allowing you to step back and see the scene from a clearer, more objective perspective. When you don't pause, your emotions take over, and you react without thinking. But with a brief delay, you can regain control of your emotions, making it possible to respond in a way that reflects your values, not your immediate feelings. So why does this work? It works because of the way our brains process emotions. When we receive a message, especially one that triggers an emotional reaction, our brain goes into fight or flight mode. We're flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which make it difficult to think clearly. This state is often called emotional hijacking, and it can lead to decisions that we later regret. By taking a pause, you allow your brain to calm down, shifting your focus from reactive to reflective. You're allowing your rational brain to take over, which helps you respond in a more grounded way. Let's break this down with a real example. Imagine you're sitting at your desk at work, and you receive an email from a colleague. The tone of the email feels condescending or dismissive. Your immediate reaction is frustration. You feel your chest tighten, and your first instinct is to fire off a sharp, defensive reply. But instead, you pause. You decide to wait a few minutes before responding. This small act of stepping away from the situation allows your emotional response to dissipate. You take a deep breath, and when you return to the email, you can read it more objectively. Now, instead of responding impulsively, you craft a polite but assertive response that addresses the issue without escalating the tension. By taking that pause, you saved yourself from making a rash decision, preserving both your professionalism and peace of mind. This is the power of creating a small reply window. The idea is to give yourself a set amount of time before replying, especially to messages that trigger an emotional reaction. This simple strategy can have a profound impact on the way you handle stress and communication. The best part is, it's incredibly easy to implement. You don't need any special tools or complex strategies. All you need is the awareness that you don't have to react immediately, and the commitment to creating a brief moment of pause. Let's go over how you can apply this practice in your daily life. A great place to start is by setting a reply window for yourself. The length of this window can vary depending on the situation, but aim for at least 5 to 10 minutes before replying to emotionally charged messages. This isn't about delaying indefinitely, it's about giving yourself enough time to regain control. For example, if you receive an upsetting text from a friend or a coworker, instead of replying right away, you tell yourself, "I'll take 5 minutes to think about this." During that time, you can take a walk, breathe deeply, or even just put your phone down for a bit. The key is to avoid acting from a place of emotional turmoil. A crucial part of this practice is reminding yourself that emotions, like anger or frustration, are temporary. When you give yourself time, those feelings will subside, and you'll have the mental clarity to respond with greater calm. When we don't take that time, we often get stuck in the heat of the moment, and our emotions dictate our actions. But when you give yourself that space, your emotional state shifts, and you're able to approach the situation from a more thoughtful, rational standpoint. Now, let's dig a little deeper into how this technique impacts your relationships. We often think that responding quickly to messages is a sign of being engaged or attentive. However, when we respond impulsively, especially during emotionally charged moments, it can lead to misunderstandings, miscommunications, and unnecessary conflict. By creating that pause, you show respect for both your own emotions and the other person's feelings. It's not about avoiding difficult conversations or confronting issues. It's about doing so in a way that preserves your composure and ensures your response is thoughtful. Consider this scenario. You're in a relationship, and your partner sends a message that triggers a defensive response in you. You feel the urge to lash out, to send a snappy reply. But instead, you take a step back. You create a brief reply window, and during those few moments, you reflect on what's really going on. You realize that your partner's message wasn't as offensive as you initially thought, and that your emotional response had more to do with stress you were already carrying. By taking that moment, you prevent an argument from escalating, and you can respond in a way that fosters understanding and communication, rather than conflict. So, here's the key takeaway. This pause is your opportunity to practice emotional awareness. It's a small, but incredibly powerful tool that helps you become aware of your emotions before you act on them. The next time you feel that surge of frustration or anger when reading a message, remember that you don't have to react right away. Instead, give yourself a moment to breathe, to process, and to decide how you want to respond. This simple shift in behavior can transform how you handle stress, how you communicate, and how you relate to others. Let's take a moment now for a brief exercise to reinforce this concept. Right now, take a few deep breaths with me. In, hold, and out. Again, in, hold, and out. Let yourself feel the tension in your body release with each breath. As you do this, remind yourself that you can take control in any situation, no matter how triggering. You have the power to pause and respond thoughtfully, rather than reacting emotionally. Practice this pause every time you feel triggered, and over time, it will become second nature. One tiny action you can take today is to start using the reply window rule. The next time you receive a message that triggers an emotional response, set a timer for 5 to 10 minutes before replying. This simple action will give you the space you need to regain control and respond in a calm, thoughtful manner. It's a small step, but it's one that will pay off in the long run. Hold on to this thought. In the next section, we'll explore the idea of emotional intelligence and how understanding your emotions on a deeper level can help you make better decisions, not just in texting, but in every area of your life. Section 3. Now that we've explored the importance of delaying your response and creating emotional space between receiving a message and reacting to it, it's time to dive deeper into the idea of emotional intelligence and how it can help you further develop emotional control, not just in texting but in all aspects of your life. Emotional intelligence, often abbreviated as EI, refers to the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and influence your emotions as well as the emotions of others. It involves being able to handle difficult situations without letting your emotions take the reins. It's a skill that many people overlook, but once you cultivate emotional intelligence, it becomes a game changer, especially in situations where your emotions could get the best of you. Think about it for a moment. How often do you react impulsively in conversations or messages? Maybe you feel defensive or frustrated and shoot back an email or text without thinking. Emotional intelligence helps you recognize that initial emotional response before it dictates your behavior. It allows you to take a step back and choose how you want to respond rather than letting your feelings control the interaction. So how does emotional intelligence fit into the framework we've been discussing? It's a natural progression. Once you've learned to pause and delay your responses to emotionally charged messages, emotional intelligence is what enables you to make better decisions about how to respond. It helps you control your emotional reactions, stay calm under pressure, and communicate in a way that strengthens your relationships instead of escalating conflict. The first part of emotional intelligence is self-awareness, the ability to recognize and understand your own emotions. Self-awareness allows you to know what triggers you, why you feel a certain way, and how your emotional state influences your behavior. For example, when you receive a message that triggers anger, you need to be aware of that feeling before it takes over. When you notice that surge of frustration, you can use your reply window to create the pause needed to step back and choose a response. Let's put this into practice with a real example. Imagine you're having a conversation with a colleague, and they make a comment that feels condescending. Your first instinct is to feel irritated, but instead of reacting right away, you pause and think, why am I feeling this way? What's really going on? This level of awareness allows you to identify that your irritation is less about the colleague's comment and more about your own stress from a previous situation. With that understanding, you can choose to respond calmly, rather than lashing out in frustration. The second part of emotional intelligence is self-regulation, the ability to manage your emotions healthily and constructively. Self-regulation is about controlling impulsive feelings and behaviors, maintaining control over your emotional state, and acting with integrity. It's particularly useful in high-stress situations, where emotions can cloud your judgment. Think about that colleague who said something frustrating. Self-regulation allows you to pause, avoid reacting immediately, and choose a measured response. When you develop self-regulation, you begin to realize that you don't have to react to every emotional impulse. Just because you feel angry, anxious, or upset doesn't mean you have to act on those emotions. You can take a step back, evaluate the situation, and choose a more thoughtful response. This is where the concept of emotional control and delayed responses becomes crucial. You're not suppressing your emotions, but rather, you're giving yourself the time to reflect and act with intention rather than reacting impulsively. Now, the third key element of emotional intelligence is motivation, the drive to achieve for the sake of internal satisfaction, not for external rewards. People with high emotional intelligence are motivated by a sense of purpose and the desire to grow and improve. This motivation is not driven by the need for validation or praise from others, but by the internal drive to be the best version of themselves. This is crucial when developing emotional control, as you need to stay motivated to practice delayed responses and stay committed to emotional regulation even when things get tough. For instance, when a difficult message arrives, you can remind yourself of the bigger picture. You're practicing emotional control for the sake of maintaining healthy relationships and clear communication. That motivation to keep improving will push you to stick with the pause practice until it becomes natural. You're not just reacting for the sake of reacting, but instead, you're acting with purpose and intentionality. Next is empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Empathy plays a huge role in emotional intelligence because it allows you to respond to others in ways that are compassionate and understanding. When you respond with empathy, you are less likely to escalate conflicts and more likely to build rapport with the people around you. Empathy also allows you to see things from the other person's perspective, which can be a game changer when navigating difficult conversations or messages. For example, imagine you receive a text from a friend that feels a bit harsh. Instead of jumping to conclusions and assuming they're upset with you, you take a moment to put yourself in their shoes. Maybe they've had a rough day and their tone is influenced by stress, not personal anger. By practicing empathy, you can respond with understanding and compassion, rather than defensiveness. You're able to keep the communication calm and constructive, which helps preserve your relationship. Finally, the fifth element of emotional intelligence is social skills, the ability to manage relationships and build networks. Social skills include things like effective communication, conflict resolution, and the ability to work well with others. In the context of emotional control, social skills help you navigate conversations with tact, diplomacy, and respect. When you develop your social skills, you can handle difficult messages or conversations with grace, avoiding escalation and promoting understanding. Here's an example of social skills in action. Let's say you receive a message from a colleague that's critical of your work. Instead of immediately defending yourself, you pause, then reply with a calm, thoughtful message that addresses the concern while also showing appreciation for their feedback. Your response helps de-escalate the situation and opens the door for a constructive discussion. This kind of communication strengthens relationships and promotes a positive, professional environment. So, now that we've explored the 5 components of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, how do you apply these principles in your daily life? The first step is to start practicing emotional awareness in every interaction. Pay attention to your emotions and how they affect your behavior. When you feel triggered, take a moment to pause and think about why you're feeling the way you are. The second step is to practice self-regulation by creating space before responding to emotionally charged messages. The next time you receive a message that makes your heart race, use your reply window rule to pause, breathe, and gather your thoughts before replying. The third step is to stay motivated by reminding yourself why you're doing this in the first place: to build stronger relationships, to communicate better, and to protect your emotional well-being. Your motivation to stay calm and composed will help you practice emotional intelligence consistently. As you continue to practice these techniques, you'll become more skilled at handling emotionally charged situations. Your relationships will improve, your stress will decrease, and you'll feel more in control of your responses. Emotional intelligence isn't just about managing emotions in the moment, it's about building long-term emotional resilience and responding to life's challenges with calm and clarity. In the next section, we'll take a look at how these practices can be applied in high-stress, real-world situations. Hold on to that thought, as we're going to dive into some concrete examples that will show you just how powerful emotional intelligence and delayed responses can be when put into practice. Section 4. In the previous sections, we explored the concept of emotional control and how delaying your response can help you break free from emotional reactivity. We also touched on the role emotional intelligence plays in giving you the tools to manage your emotions more effectively. But now, let's take a deeper dive into the application of these ideas. Specifically, we'll focus on how these principles can be used in real-world situations, where emotional control is tested under pressure. Consider this: you're at work, and you've just received an email from a colleague that's critical of your recent project. The tone is blunt, and you immediately feel the heat rising in your chest. You feel defensive, maybe even a little embarrassed. Your first instinct is to fire back with a sharp reply, defending your work and pushing back against the critique. But before you do that, let's take a moment to pause and apply everything we've discussed so far. You know from the previous sections that reacting impulsively won't serve you well. But in this situation, the emotions are strong. The pressure is on. What can you do to break the cycle and create the space you need to respond effectively? This is where the power of self-awareness and self-regulation comes into play. The first thing you need to do is recognize the emotional trigger. You're feeling defensive, maybe even a little embarrassed, but that's just the emotional reaction. Your self-awareness helps you understand that what you're feeling isn't a reflection of the actual situation, it's just your body's natural response to a perceived threat or criticism. By identifying the emotions at play, you gain a sense of control over them. Next, you apply self-regulation, the ability to control your emotional impulses. Instead of responding right away, you take a moment to pause. You might take a few deep breaths, step away from your desk, or even leave the room for a few minutes. This creates the space you need to cool down and assess the situation with a clear mind. You are no longer acting from a place of defensiveness or emotion, you're taking charge of the situation. This pause allows you to come back to the email with a fresh perspective. You might now realize that while the tone was blunt, the feedback itself wasn't necessarily meant to be personal. You can respond calmly and professionally, acknowledging the critique, providing your perspective, and offering solutions for improvement. Your response is measured, thoughtful, and respectful. Instead of escalating the tension, you've diffused it. This is one example of how delaying your response can lead to better outcomes in professional situations. But let's take it a step further and look at how these practices can be applied in personal relationships. Relationships often involve high-stakes emotions, and many of us react impulsively when we feel hurt, misunderstood, or frustrated. But when we practice emotional control and use the tools of emotional intelligence, we can navigate these situations with greater grace and empathy. Imagine you're in a conversation with your partner, and something they say triggers a sense of frustration. Perhaps they've misunderstood something you said earlier, or they're being critical of something you've done. The immediate reaction is to become defensive or to shut down. But in that moment, you remember the pause. You recall what we discussed about emotional control, and you take a step back. Instead of immediately defending yourself or raising your voice, you use self-awareness to check in with yourself. You recognize the emotional response, frustration, and you acknowledge it. Then, you apply self-regulation by taking a few seconds to breathe deeply and collect your thoughts. This pause allows you to prevent the situation from escalating and gives you the opportunity to choose a more thoughtful response. When you return to the conversation, you're able to express your feelings in a calm and assertive manner, without resorting to defensiveness or anger. You might say something like, "I understand that you're upset, but here's my perspective." This shift in communication helps maintain the peace and fosters understanding between you and your partner. You've used your emotional intelligence to navigate a potentially volatile situation with empathy and calmness. But it's not just about handling the other person's emotions, it's also about managing your own. Emotional intelligence and delayed responses help you avoid the tendency to take things personally. When you stop reacting impulsively, you create space for empathy. You can see the other person's perspective more clearly, and you can respond in a way that is aligned with your values and goals for the relationship. In a work context, this same principle applies. When you feel your emotions rising in response to a colleague's actions or feedback, you can use the delay to consider their point of view. Are they stressed? Do they have valid concerns that you may not have considered? By practicing empathy, you open the door to more productive, collaborative communication. Instead of making the conversation about winning or defending yourself, it becomes about understanding and resolution. Now, you might be wondering, how do you make this practice a regular part of your life? The key is to commit to the pause. It's not always easy, especially when emotions are high. But the more you practice creating that space before responding, the easier it becomes. And over time, it becomes a habit that feels natural. Here's how to start. Commit to your reply window. When you receive an emotionally charged message, commit to taking at least 5 minutes before responding. This simple practice will help you create the space you need to process your emotions and respond thoughtfully. Check in with yourself. Before replying, ask yourself how you're feeling and why. Recognize your emotional triggers and acknowledge them. By identifying the emotions at play, you take away their power over you. Practice self-regulation. Use the pause to regulate your emotional state. Take deep breaths, walk around, or engage in another grounding activity. When you return to the situation, you'll feel calmer and more in control. Empathy is key. When engaging with others, practice seeing the situation from their perspective. This not only helps you maintain calm but also strengthens your relationships by showing that you care about their feelings. Reflect regularly. After challenging conversations or emotionally charged situations, take a moment to reflect on how you responded. Did you apply the techniques we've discussed? If not, how can you improve next time? Remember, this process takes time, and it's okay if you don't get it perfect every time. The important thing is to keep practicing and to remain committed to responding thoughtfully, not reacting impulsively. We've covered a lot in this section, but before we move on, let's take a quick pause to reinforce the practice. Right now, take a few deep breaths with me. In, hold, and out. Once more, breathe in, hold, and out. With each breath, you're strengthening your emotional control. The more you practice, the more natural it will become to pause, reflect, and respond with calm. In the next section, we'll dive into a real-life story that demonstrates how these techniques come together in a challenging situation. We'll explore how the combination of emotional control, empathy, and delayed responses can make all the difference in high-pressure moments. You won't want to miss it. Section 5. In the previous sections, we've covered the fundamentals of emotional control, including how delaying your response and practicing emotional intelligence can help you manage difficult situations more effectively. We've also seen how these principles apply in work and personal relationships. But now, let's take a closer look at the deeper, underlying mechanisms that govern our emotional responses, and explore how these insights can empower you to take control of your emotions, no matter the situation. We've already discussed the importance of self-awareness and self-regulation, but there's another layer to this practice: understanding the root causes of your emotional reactions. To truly gain control over your responses, it's crucial to recognize why certain things trigger such strong emotional reactions in the first place. Often, these triggers aren't just about the present moment. They are tied to past experiences, insecurities, and deep-rooted beliefs that can amplify our emotional responses. Let's take a step back and consider a situation where you find yourself getting overly defensive. Maybe a colleague makes a comment about a project you've worked on, and instead of calmly considering the feedback, you immediately feel attacked. Your first instinct is to lash out and defend your work. But why do you feel so defensive? Is it the comment itself, or is it something deeper, perhaps a fear of criticism, insecurity about your abilities, or a history of being judged in past experiences? Understanding your emotional triggers helps you gain clarity. Instead of just reacting to the surface-level issue, you start to see what's beneath it. By identifying your personal triggers, you can separate them from the actual situation and respond from a place of clarity and control. This awareness helps you see the bigger picture, rather than being swept up in emotional reactions that stem from past experiences. Take a moment to reflect on this. When you feel triggered by a message or situation, ask yourself, what am I really reacting to? Is it the message itself, or is there something deeper at play? By answering this question, you begin to untangle the emotional knots and gain greater control over your responses. But here's the real power of this practice. Once you identify the underlying causes of your emotional reactions, you can begin to reframe them. Reframing is a cognitive technique that involves changing the way you perceive a situation. It's about looking at a problem from a different angle, so you can see it in a more constructive light. This is where the Stoic practice of cognitive distancing comes into play, stepping back from the immediate emotional reaction and choosing to view the situation more objectively. For example, let's say you receive a harsh critique from a colleague. Your initial emotional reaction might be anger or defensiveness, but instead of reacting impulsively, you pause. You identify that the critique has triggered your fear of being judged. Now, instead of reacting with frustration, you reframe the situation. You tell yourself, this feedback is an opportunity to learn and improve, not a personal attack. By reframing the situation, you shift your perspective from one of defensiveness to one of growth and self-improvement. Reframing is a powerful tool that helps you take control of your emotional state. Instead of allowing your initial emotional reaction to dictate your behavior, you create space for a more rational, productive response. When you practice reframing regularly, it becomes a natural part of your emotional toolkit, allowing you to handle difficult situations with greater ease and clarity. Let's take this a step further and explore how mindfulness can enhance your emotional control. Mindfulness is the practice of being present and fully engaged in the current moment, without judgment. It's about observing your thoughts and emotions as they arise, without becoming overwhelmed by them. When you practice mindfulness, you can begin to recognize when emotions are building inside you, and instead of reacting, you can observe them with curiosity. This awareness gives you the opportunity to choose your response, rather than simply reacting to the emotion. Here's how mindfulness works in practice. Imagine you're having a conversation with a friend, and they say something that triggers irritation in you. Instead of immediately responding with annoyance or frustration, you take a deep breath and observe the feeling of irritation. You might notice that the feeling is uncomfortable, but you don't let it control you. Instead of reacting from a place of anger, you decide to stay calm and respond with understanding. Mindfulness also helps you stay present in your interactions, which is crucial for maintaining emotional control in relationships. Often, when we feel triggered, we begin to think about past events or worry about future outcomes. This distracts us from the present moment and makes it harder to respond thoughtfully. But mindfulness keeps you anchored in the here and now, allowing you to respond more effectively and with greater emotional clarity. Another important aspect of emotional control is developing healthy coping strategies for managing stress and difficult emotions. While delaying your response and practicing mindfulness are powerful tools, it's also essential to have other strategies in your emotional toolkit to help you manage stress and stay calm under pressure. This might include practices like deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, or even taking short breaks throughout the day to clear your mind. For example, if you feel overwhelmed by an emotionally charged situation, take a moment to close your eyes and focus on your breath. Slowly inhale for a count of 4, hold for 4, and exhale for 4. This simple breathing technique can help activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming your body down. In just a few moments, you'll feel your stress levels decrease, and you'll be able to approach the situation with greater calm and clarity. You can also incorporate physical activities like walking, stretching, or yoga into your daily routine to help manage stress and maintain emotional balance. Exercise has been shown to reduce the levels of stress hormones in the body, and it can also help regulate your mood. By making physical activity a regular part of your day, you create a healthy outlet for your emotions and build resilience to stress. Now, let's look at how these emotional control techniques can be applied in high-stress situations. Think about the last time you had to manage a difficult conversation or a high-stakes situation at work or in your personal life. How did you handle it? Did you react impulsively, or did you take a step back and apply the strategies we've discussed? The next time you're faced with a high-pressure situation, remember the importance of self-awareness, self-regulation, mindfulness, and reframing. By using these tools, you'll be better equipped to navigate challenges with composure and make decisions that align with your values. Here's a tiny action you can take today. The next time you feel emotionally triggered, pause and ask yourself, what am I really reacting to? Take a moment to identify the underlying cause of your emotion. Then, practice reframing the situation by viewing it through a more constructive lens. This simple practice will help you shift from emotional reactivity to thoughtful, intentional responses. As you continue to practice these techniques, you'll notice that you become more resilient to stress and better equipped to handle emotionally charged situations. By developing emotional intelligence and incorporating these strategies into your daily life, you'll cultivate a sense of calm and clarity, no matter what life throws your way. In the next section, we'll explore a real-world example where these principles come together in a high-pressure scenario. We'll see how the tools of emotional control, self-awareness, and reframing can transform an otherwise stressful situation into an opportunity for growth. You won't want to miss it. Section 6. In the previous sections, we've discussed a variety of strategies to help you take control of your emotional reactions, especially in the context of texting and communication. We've looked at the importance of delaying your responses, practicing emotional intelligence, and reframing emotional situations. Now, let's delve deeper into how these strategies can be applied when your emotions are truly tested, when you're under pressure and faced with high-stakes situations that demand emotional control. We all know what it feels like to be in a high-pressure situation. Whether it's dealing with a difficult client at work, having a tough conversation with a loved one, or navigating a stressful moment on social media, the stakes feel higher, and the emotional responses are stronger. In these moments, it's easy to fall back into old habits, responding quickly, reacting without thinking, or even shutting down completely. But the difference between a reaction and a response is key here. A reaction is emotional, impulsive, and often regrettable. A response is thoughtful, intentional, and measured. Let's look at a situation where emotional control could make all the difference. Imagine you're at work, and your boss calls you into their office. You're told that a project you've been working on has not met expectations, and there's a lot of pressure to fix it quickly. In that moment, your heart races, your palms sweat, and your immediate reaction is to feel defensive or even angry. How could they not see the work you've put in? But before you react, you remember the techniques we've been talking about: self-awareness, self-regulation, delayed response, and reframing. The first step is self-awareness. As soon as you feel the rush of frustration, you recognize it for what it is: an emotional reaction to perceived criticism. You might notice your breath quickening or your body tensing. That's the first cue. Your body is reacting before your mind can catch up. But instead of responding immediately, you take a deep breath, which brings us to self-regulation. You've learned that when you pause and control your breath, you can lower the intensity of the emotional reaction. You create that moment of distance between the emotion and your response. By creating this space, you're able to step back and reframe the situation. Instead of viewing the feedback as a personal attack, you reframe it as an opportunity for growth. You think to yourself, this is feedback that will help me improve. It's not about my worth, it's about getting better at what I do. This reframe shifts your mindset from defensiveness to receptivity, allowing you to respond in a calm and composed manner. Once you've managed to center yourself, you can move forward with an intentional response. You might say something like, "Thank you for the feedback. I can see where improvements are needed. Let me take some time to revise the project and come back to you with solutions." This response not only acknowledges the feedback but also positions you as a problem solver, someone who can handle constructive criticism without letting emotions dictate the conversation. This is the power of delayed responses in high-pressure situations. It's easy to assume that we need to react quickly to show that we care or that we're engaged. But the reality is, reacting impulsively often leads to poor decisions, miscommunication, and unnecessary conflict. When you delay your response and give yourself time to process your emotions, you give yourself the opportunity to think clearly and respond with intention. This allows you to approach the situation more rationally, improving the outcome for everyone involved. Now, let's consider a situation in your personal life where emotional control can be just as important. Imagine a situation where you're texting with a friend or partner, and something they say triggers a strong emotional reaction in you. Maybe they've made a comment that feels dismissive or hurtful. Your immediate reaction might be to fire back with a sharp response, feeling hurt or angry. But before you respond, remember the tools we've discussed. Self-awareness is your first step. Recognize the emotional reaction you're having, acknowledge that the comment has triggered you, but don't let it control you. Next, apply self-regulation by pausing before responding. You might step away from your phone for a few minutes, or take a few deep breaths to calm your emotions. By doing this, you're creating that critical space between the emotional trigger and your response. Instead of immediately reacting from a place of hurt, you're able to return to the conversation with a clearer head and a more balanced perspective. Once you've given yourself that pause, it's time to reframe the situation. Instead of viewing the comment as a direct attack, try to consider the context. Maybe your friend or partner is stressed about something else, or perhaps they didn't mean to come across the way they did. Reframing the situation helps you see it from a more compassionate perspective, which enables you to respond with empathy and understanding rather than defensiveness. Your response might look something like, "I felt a little hurt by your comment earlier, but I understand that things might be stressful for you. Let's talk about it when we're both in a better headspace." This response acknowledges your feelings without escalating the situation. It's an intentional, thoughtful reply that fosters healthy communication and keeps the conversation on track. Now, the real key to success in these high-pressure situations is practice. The more you practice delaying your responses, practicing self-regulation, and reframing situations, the easier it becomes. You begin to recognize your emotional triggers before they control you, and you can respond in a way that's aligned with your values. But it takes time and consistent effort. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. One small action you can take today is to start practicing delayed responses in everyday situations. The next time you receive a text that triggers an emotional reaction, instead of replying immediately, set a timer for 5 minutes. Use that time to breathe, reflect, and think about how you want to respond. You'll be amazed at how much calmer and clearer you feel after just a few minutes of pause. Another key action is to practice reframing in situations where you feel triggered. The next time you're faced with a situation that feels emotionally charged, ask yourself, how can I view this differently? Shift your perspective from reacting to responding with intention and understanding. Over time, this practice will transform how you navigate emotionally charged situations. As you continue practicing these techniques, you'll build emotional resilience and become more equipped to handle high-pressure situations. You'll find that the more you pause and reflect before responding, the more control you have over your emotional reactions. You'll be able to approach any situation with greater calm, clarity, and purpose. In the next section, we'll look at a real-world vignette that showcases these principles in action. You'll see how emotional control, self-regulation, and reframing come together to create better outcomes in real-life situations. We'll also explore how these tools can help you navigate even the most challenging conversations with ease. Section 7. In the last section, we discussed how emotional control, self-regulation, and reframing can help you navigate high-stakes situations with composure and clarity. By creating space before responding and reframing your emotional reactions, you can maintain control in even the most challenging moments. Now, let's dive deeper into the next level of emotional control, establishing boundaries. This is a critical part of emotional intelligence that many people overlook. Learning to set healthy boundaries can drastically improve your emotional well-being and your relationships, both personally and professionally. When you don't set clear boundaries, you allow external factors, whether it's other people's expectations, demands, or emotional triggers, to dictate your emotional state. This is a surefire way to experience burnout, frustration, and resentment. Setting boundaries is not about being rude or dismissive, it's about protecting your emotional energy and ensuring that you can engage with others in a healthy and productive way. The better you get at setting boundaries, the more in control you'll feel of your emotional responses and interactions. So, what exactly are boundaries, and why are they so important? Boundaries are the guidelines, rules, or limits you set for yourself and others in order to protect your well-being. They define what acceptable behavior is and what is not. Boundaries can be physical, emotional, mental, or even spiritual. They can be related to your time, your energy, your personal space, or your emotional capacity. Let's look at a practical example of how setting boundaries works. Imagine you're at work, and a colleague frequently asks for help with tasks that aren't part of your responsibilities. At first, you're happy to assist, but over time, the requests start to feel overwhelming. You're already stretched thin with your own workload, and you feel frustrated by the constant interruptions. In this situation, it's essential to set a clear boundary. Setting a boundary could look like this. You have a candid conversation with your colleague and explain that while you're happy to help from time to time, you need to prioritize your own tasks and responsibilities. You let them know that you won't be able to assist with additional tasks unless they align with your job description or are of critical importance. This is a respectful but firm boundary that ensures you're not overwhelmed by additional work, and it helps you protect your emotional energy. When you set boundaries, you not only protect your time and energy, but you also communicate your needs to others in a clear and respectful way. By doing so, you set the tone for how you expect to be treated. The key here is to communicate your boundaries early, before they are violated. When you do this, you are preventing resentment from building up and maintaining healthier, more respectful relationships. However, setting boundaries isn't always easy. Many people struggle with boundary setting because they fear confrontation or worry about disappointing others. This fear of conflict can lead to people-pleasing behaviors, where you prioritize the needs of others over your own, often to your detriment. But the truth is, setting boundaries is not only good for you, it's also good for the people around you. When you establish clear limits, you are showing others that you respect yourself, and you are teaching them how to treat you. Let's take another example. You're in a personal relationship, and your partner frequently sends text messages or calls during your work hours, disrupting your focus. While you care about them and want to be available, the constant interruptions are starting to affect your productivity and mental well-being. This is a classic scenario where setting a boundary is essential. You could calmly explain to your partner that while you value your time together, you need uninterrupted work time during certain hours of the day. You can agree on times to catch up that don't interfere with your work commitments. Setting this kind of boundary allows you to maintain balance in your relationship and in your personal life. It's a clear communication of your needs, and it shows respect for both your time and your partner's. The key here is to express your boundaries in a way that is calm, compassionate, and non-confrontational, while also being firm and clear. Now, let's talk about one of the most challenging aspects of boundary setting, enforcing your boundaries. It's one thing to communicate your limits, but it's another to stick to them, especially when others try to push back. Often, people might not respect your boundaries at first, especially if they are used to you being more accommodating. This is when the practice of self-regulation becomes especially important. You need to have the emotional control to maintain your boundaries, even when faced with resistance or guilt from others. For example, if your colleague continues to ask for help after you've set the boundary, you need to calmly remind them of your limits. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but sticking to your boundaries is crucial for your emotional well-being. Remember, setting boundaries is a form of self-respect, and enforcing them is necessary for maintaining your sense of control. One strategy for enforcing your boundaries is to practice assertiveness. Assertiveness is the ability to communicate your needs, desires, and feelings in a direct, honest, and respectful way. It's different from aggressiveness, which can come off as hostile or disrespectful. Assertiveness is about being firm and clear, but also compassionate and understanding. For example, when enforcing a boundary, you might say something like, "I understand that you need help, and I'm happy to assist with urgent matters. However, I cannot take on extra tasks that are outside my responsibilities at this time." This statement is direct, respectful, and sets a clear expectation for future behavior. It allows you to enforce your boundary without creating unnecessary conflict. Another essential aspect of setting and enforcing boundaries is self-care. Boundaries are a key component of self-care because they allow you to protect your emotional and physical well-being. When you take the time to set boundaries, you are prioritizing your needs and ensuring that you have the energy and space to focus on the things that matter most to you. Whether it's carving out time for rest, setting limits on work hours, or protecting your mental health, self-care is an integral part of the boundary-setting process. To put it into action, here's a tiny step you can take today. Think about one area of your life where you feel overextended, whether it's work, family, or social commitments. Identify a boundary you can set in that area. It might be something small, like saying no to an extra request, or it might be a larger step, like having a conversation about your needs. Start with one boundary, and practice communicating it clearly and assertively. Setting boundaries isn't something that happens overnight. It takes practice and consistency. But over time, as you get more comfortable with setting and enforcing boundaries, you'll find that you're able to manage your emotions more effectively. You'll be less reactive, more in control, and more focused on what truly matters to you. In the next section, we'll explore how all of these principles, emotional control, self-awareness, reframing, and boundary setting, work together in real-life scenarios. We'll look at a powerful example of how these tools can be used in a particularly challenging situation, and how they ultimately help you regain control and navigate the challenge with confidence. Section 8. As we dive deeper into emotional control, we've explored how to delay our responses, practice emotional intelligence, and create boundaries to protect our well-being. But as we've discussed, emotional control isn't just about responding thoughtfully in everyday situations. It's about creating a mindset and a set of tools that empower you to navigate even the most challenging emotional moments with confidence. Now, we're going to build on everything we've covered so far and focus on handling criticism, one of the most challenging emotional experiences we face in both personal and professional life. Criticism, whether constructive or negative, is something that everyone encounters. Whether it's feedback on a work project, a comment from a friend, or a critique from a family member, criticism often triggers an emotional response. We may feel defensive, hurt, angry, or even embarrassed. It's completely natural to feel emotionally triggered by criticism. It's a sign that we care about our work or relationships, and that we have a desire to be accepted and valued. But here's the problem: when we react emotionally to criticism, we miss the opportunity to use it constructively. Instead of using it as a tool for growth, we internalize it and let it affect our self-esteem or derail our progress. This is where emotional control comes into play. The ability to manage your emotional response to criticism allows you to receive feedback with clarity rather than defensiveness. It allows you to separate the emotion from the message and determine whether the criticism is valid, helpful, or just a reflection of the other person's perspective. The first step in handling criticism is to pause and breathe. The moment you receive criticism, especially if it feels harsh or unfair, your emotional response is likely to be strong. Your instinct may be to push back, argue, or defend yourself. But before you react, take a deep breath. Just like with the delayed response strategy we've practiced, giving yourself a moment to process the feedback allows you to move from an emotional reaction to a more thoughtful response. In this pause, you can use the tools we've discussed, self-awareness and self-regulation, to recognize the emotions you're feeling and make a conscious decision not to let those emotions dictate your actions. For example, you might feel defensive because the criticism feels like a personal attack. But if you take a step back and practice self-awareness, you can identify that the defensiveness is rooted in insecurity or fear of failure. This recognition gives you the power to address the emotion rather than be consumed by it. Once you've taken a moment to pause and regulate your emotions, the next step is to listen actively to the feedback you're receiving. Often, in emotionally charged situations, we focus more on our emotional reaction than on actually understanding what the other person is saying. Active listening means hearing the message without judgment or interruption and focusing on understanding the content rather than the delivery. For example, if you receive criticism from a colleague about a project you've worked on, your first reaction might be to feel hurt or defensive. However, instead of focusing on your emotional response, try to listen actively. What is the specific feedback? Is there something in the feedback that can help you improve? Is the critique fair or based on a misunderstanding? Active listening allows you to process the message objectively so you can make informed decisions about how to respond. One of the key techniques for handling criticism is reframing. In much the same way we've reframed situations in previous sections, reframing criticism involves changing the way you perceive the message. Instead of viewing criticism as an attack on your abilities, try to view it as an opportunity for growth. This shift in mindset allows you to take the feedback seriously without letting it affect your self-worth. For example, imagine you're at work and receive a critique from your manager about a report you submitted. Instead of thinking, "I'm terrible at this job" or "they don't appreciate my efforts," reframe the situation by telling yourself, "This is valuable feedback that will help me improve and do better next time." This reframing allows you to accept the feedback with grace and use it to fuel your improvement rather than letting it deflate you. Another powerful strategy for handling criticism is separating your self-worth from your performance. Too often, we equate criticism with a reflection of our value as a person. But it's important to recognize that feedback is about your actions or work, not your identity. When we tie our sense of self to the outcome of our efforts, we set ourselves up for emotional turmoil every time something goes wrong. For instance, if a partner criticizes your handling of a situation, it doesn't mean you're a bad person, it means there's an opportunity to adjust your approach. By separating your self-worth from the criticism, you allow yourself to accept the feedback without feeling like a failure. This separation is key to staying emotionally resilient in the face of feedback. When you combine all of these strategies, pausing to breathe, practicing self-awareness, listening actively, reframing, and separating your self-worth from your performance, you're building an emotional toolkit that can help you respond to criticism with composure and grace. But one final element of handling criticism is responding with gratitude. I know this might sound counterintuitive, especially when the feedback feels harsh, but responding with gratitude is a powerful way to shift your perspective and diffuse any tension in the moment. Gratitude in the face of criticism might look like saying, "Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts." This doesn't mean that you agree with everything that was said, but it signals to the other person that you are open to constructive criticism and that you value their input. Responding with gratitude also helps you maintain your emotional composure because it redirects your focus from the emotional impact of the criticism to the opportunity for growth and improvement. Here's a practical example of how you can apply these techniques. Imagine you're in a meeting with your boss and they provide feedback about a recent presentation you gave. Instead of reacting immediately with defensiveness or frustration, you take a deep breath and listen actively. You realize that the feedback is valid and can help you improve future presentations. Instead of internalizing the criticism, you reframe it as an opportunity to enhance your skills. You thank your boss for the feedback and ask for any additional tips for improvement. In this way, you've handled the criticism with emotional control, gratitude, and a growth mindset. To apply these techniques in your own life, start by practicing the pause. The next time you receive criticism, whether at work, in a relationship, or even online, take a moment to breathe before responding. Reflect on the feedback, listen carefully, reframe it, and separate your self-worth from the critique. With time, you'll find that handling criticism becomes less emotionally taxing, and you'll be able to approach feedback with a calm, objective mindset. In the next section, we'll explore a real-life vignette that demonstrates how these emotional control strategies come together in a high-pressure situation. We'll see how the ability to manage criticism, delay responses, and apply reframing helps transform an emotionally charged scenario into a moment of growth and clarity. Section 9. Now that we've explored all the tools and strategies for emotional control, it's time to put them into practice in a high-stakes, real-world scenario. In this section, we'll walk through a composite situation where everything we've discussed, delaying your response, practicing emotional intelligence, reframing criticism, and setting boundaries, comes together to help you navigate a particularly challenging moment. Imagine you're having a busy week at work. You've been juggling multiple projects and handling a lot of pressure. One day, in the middle of your workday, you receive a message from your boss. The message is blunt and critical, pointing out several mistakes you made on a recent project. You feel your stomach drop and your pulse quicken. Immediately, you feel frustrated and defensive. The urge to react right away is strong. You want to explain yourself, defend your work, and push back on the feedback. But then, you remember everything you've learned, delay your response, stay calm, reframe the situation, and set boundaries. This is your moment to practice emotional control. You take a deep breath. Instead of replying immediately, you give yourself a pause. You decide to wait at least 10 minutes before responding. During that time, you step away from your desk and go for a short walk. This physical movement helps clear your mind and calm your body, breaking the emotional intensity of the moment. While walking, you reflect on the situation. You practice self-awareness by acknowledging the emotions rising inside you. I'm feeling defensive, you recognize, because I worked hard on that project and didn't expect to be criticized like this. You also remind yourself that these emotions are temporary and don't have to control your response. After your brief walk, you return to your desk and sit down with a clear head. Now, it's time for reframing. Instead of viewing the feedback as a personal attack, you reframe it as a learning opportunity. You remind yourself that your boss's critique isn't about your worth or capabilities, it's about improving the work. You tell yourself, this is feedback that will help me do better next time. I don't need to take it personally. Armed with this new perspective, you approach your response. Instead of reacting impulsively, you write a calm and thoughtful reply. Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate you pointing out these areas where I can improve. I'll take a closer look at the project and make the necessary adjustments. Let me know if you have any additional suggestions. Your response is measured, professional, and focused on the solution rather than the problem. The difference is clear. By taking the time to pause, reflect, and reframe the situation, you've transformed what could have been an emotional outburst into a constructive exchange. Not only have you avoided escalating the situation, but you've also set a clear boundary for how you'll handle criticism moving forward. Instead of letting the emotional weight of the feedback take over, you've used it as an opportunity to grow and improve. In this moment, you've also practiced emotional intelligence. You've recognized your emotional triggers, used self-regulation to manage your reactions, and responded in a way that reflects your values. You've applied all the tools we've discussed to navigate a challenging situation with clarity and composure. You've created space for yourself to make an intentional response, rather than reacting out of frustration or defensiveness. Later that day, you feel a sense of accomplishment. Not because the feedback was easy to receive, but because you handled it with maturity and emotional control. You've not only maintained your composure, but you've also set a precedent for how you want to handle similar situations in the future. This experience also reinforces the importance of boundary setting. By practicing emotional control and reframing the criticism, you've protected your emotional well-being. You didn't let the feedback overwhelm you or define your self-worth. Instead, you used it as a stepping stone for improvement. Moving forward, you'll be more likely to set clear boundaries around how you accept and respond to feedback, protecting yourself from unnecessary emotional strain. The key takeaway from this scenario is simple: emotional control is a skill that can be applied in even the most challenging moments. Whether it's dealing with criticism, handling high-pressure situations, or managing your relationships, the tools you've learned in this course can help you navigate these challenges with greater ease and clarity. By pausing, reflecting, reframing, and setting boundaries, you can take control of your emotional responses and create better outcomes for yourself and others. Now that you've seen how these strategies come together in a high-stakes scenario, it's time to apply them to your own life. Think about a situation you're currently facing where emotional control would help you respond more thoughtfully. Maybe it's a challenging conversation with a friend, a stressful work project, or a tense family dynamic. Practice what you've learned, pause, reflect, reframe, and set boundaries, and see how these tools help you transform your emotional responses into intentional actions. In the next section, we'll wrap up this lesson by reviewing the key concepts, providing actionable steps you can take today, and exploring how to continue building on these skills. You'll leave with the confidence to handle any situation with emotional control and clarity. Section 10. We've covered a lot of ground in this lesson: how to manage emotional reactions, delay responses, apply emotional intelligence, set boundaries, and reframe situations. Through these strategies, you've learned how to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively in emotionally charged situations. Now, let's recap the core lesson and take a look at the actionable steps you can start applying in your own life today. At the heart of this lesson is one key idea: responding intentionally, not reacting emotionally. Life is full of situations that can trigger strong emotions, whether it's work-related feedback, personal conflicts, or unexpected messages. The challenge is not to avoid these situations, but to handle them with composure and clarity. By practicing emotional control and using the tools we've discussed, you can shift from reacting impulsively to responding with intention. First, we looked at the power of delayed responses. Taking a pause before responding gives you the space you need to process your emotions and choose a measured, thoughtful response. This small delay can prevent you from making rash decisions or saying things you might regret. It's a simple but effective strategy that can be applied to almost any situation. Next, we explored emotional intelligence, which involves self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and social skills. By developing emotional intelligence, you can recognize and manage your emotions, understand the emotions of others, and communicate more effectively. These skills help you navigate challenging situations with greater ease and prevent emotional reactions from controlling your behavior. We also discussed the importance of reframing. When faced with criticism or difficult feedback, reframing allows you to see the situation from a new perspective. Instead of viewing criticism as a personal attack, you can view it as an opportunity for growth and improvement. This shift in mindset helps you stay open to feedback and respond constructively, rather than defensively. In addition to reframing, we covered boundary setting, which is essential for maintaining emotional control. Boundaries help you protect your time, energy, and emotional well-being. By setting clear boundaries, you prevent others from draining your emotional resources and ensure that your needs are respected. Whether it's saying no to extra tasks at work or communicating your need for space in a relationship, boundaries are a key component of emotional resilience. Now, let's look at 3 do-today steps that you can take right now to start applying what you've learned. Pause before responding. The next time you receive a message that triggers an emotional reaction, take a moment to pause before responding. Set a timer for 5 to 10 minutes and use that time to breathe, reflect, and reframe the situation. This simple practice will help you avoid reacting impulsively and allow you to respond thoughtfully. Set a boundary. Think about one area of your life where you feel overextended, whether it's at work, in your personal relationships, or with your time. Today, set one boundary to protect your emotional well-being. It could be as simple as saying no to an extra commitment, or as significant as having a conversation about your needs with a colleague or loved one. Practice reframing. The next time you receive feedback or criticism, practice reframing the situation. Instead of reacting defensively, remind yourself that feedback is an opportunity to grow and improve. Use the feedback as a tool for self-improvement, not as a reflection of your worth. Finally, if this lesson resonated with you, you will want to watch the next one on developing emotional resilience. In this upcoming lesson, we'll dive deeper into building long-term emotional strength and navigating life's challenges with grace and composure. If you want a whole library of Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships, this is what we do here every week. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.